Good morning, all. Happy Monday. This is Faith Family Focus, and I am one of your co-hosts, Faith Suggs, former Duke women's basketball graduate and currently founder and CEO of Brand by Faith, a social media branding company dedicated to telling the story of our clients. And this wonderful man next to me is my father, Schaefer Suggs, former NFL player with the New York Jets and the Cincinnati Bengals, and has also served on the executive board and as VP with the Chicago RPFPC, which is the former players of Chicago. Good morning, Dad. How are you?
I'm doing good. The retired professional football players of Chicago. It's always a tongue twister. I know. I'm doing good. I can see you're in a very joyful mood.
Well, I'm very excited for our show today. We get to continue our conversation with Bob Reese and also bring on Craig Chval. So it's exciting stuff as we're nearing the end of National Recovery Month. But to recap this weekend, a lot of football happened this weekend. The Chiefs lost, which is something that's close to me because I'm right down the street from Kansas City, which was surprising. So interesting thoughts for our golden boy, Mahomes, but I'm sure he'll be okay as we're nearing an interesting season. A lot of losses actually this weekend with Brady, your Jets, per usual, the Giants.
Per usual.
Yeah, well, New York and football in New York right now apparently aren't going hand in hand.
Yeah, no, I think this season will probably reveal more than the previous seasons the parity in the league. And teams are playing good football. You see Tampa Bay. I was surprised how good the Rams were. So it's going to be an exciting year. I mean, I don't even want to address the Jets. It's hard. Probably Bob could probably feel my pain, and of course Craig, who's known me for 34 years, feel my pain too. So we won't spend too much time on that. And the Yale Bulldogs won this weekend. So Devin got his first collegiate win against my buddy Marinero's alma mater, Cornell. And so that was an exciting day. And my flag football team won 2 games.
Why don't you tell everybody how you guys won?
Which team?
You guys. So your flag football team.
Flag football team. Well, we're just dominant. Our offensive coordinator is pretty good. He knows a little bit about football. We're in a triple reverse. We're kind of running double reverse. These are 8, 9-year-old kids, and they're having a lot of fun. And of course, I'm in my joy being out there. Of course, I'm coaching with Coach Tony Smith, which is your former basketball coach. So you have 2. I'm the offensive coordinator. He's the defensive coordinator, and we are just having a blast. So it was a great weekend. And I'm excited. We have a game on Tuesday. We have a game on Thursday. And, of course, I think the Yale Bulldogs, they have Lehigh this weekend. So that should continue their winning streak with Lehigh. So I'm excited. But more importantly, I'm excited about our show. This is a continuation of National Recovery Month. And I just am very honored to have, in my 34 years of long-term recovery, have some beautiful people in my life. And 2 of these people are on the show. Bob Reese, my former trainer with the New York Jets, and then Craig Chval, who has been a lifelong, my friend in recovery, has been on our show a couple of times. And we have a really huge storyboard, Faith. I know that there's so much to talk about. But, when you look at the 3 of us, you have over 70 years of recovery. And I just felt that our viewers and people out there that they have a lens on recovery and how to thrive through recovery would get something from this show. And I just wanted to be able to share this. And I really appreciate you hosting it. And if you want to take a quick break before we bring them on, but I just wanted to introduce the topic.
Yeah, so a few announcements, though, before we dive into the topic. We had a great show on Friday with The Huddle with guest Nolan Smith, former Duke men's basketball player, national champion,
awesome show.
NBA draft pick, Olympian, gold medalist, and now assistant coach with Duke basketball. So if you guys missed it, feel free to scroll down. It's on our Facebook as well as E360 TV, YouTube, and all of our platforms. And we look forward to letting you guys know who the guest is for Friday. And then also, I am very excited for this show. If you can get a chance, share the show, comment, talk with us, discuss, ask questions. That'd be a wonderful way for us to connect with you guys this morning as we're nearing our episode of National Recovery Month. And after this quick break, we will bring on Craig and Bob and we'll talk about National Recovery Month. Good morning, Bob. Good morning, Craig. Thank you for joining us.
Morning, Faith. Morning, everybody. Always great to be here.
I feel the same way.
Yeah, this is a superstar show. But let me just say this really quick. Faith, your first 2 episodes of the Huddle have been really phenomenal. We just really have got a chance. The last episode with Nolan and hearing his story about losing his dad and just everything was just a phenomenal story. And I look forward to the Huddle on Friday.
Thank you. Yeah, we've received a lot of great reviews. I tried to clip pieces of it from the original episode for the next episode. So when you guys tune into the episodes, you'll get to see previous episodes, just little bits and pieces that were great. But very excited for this show today. That we talked a lot on last Monday with Bob about, thriving within recovery, the recovery process, because this month is very special to each of you, but in general, a lot of people around the world. Craig, welcome. We did speak about recovery last week, but one of the topics we touched on was how to thrive or survive within recovery. What do you think the difference is between the two in your own experience?
That's a great question, and I was thinking about this over the weekend a little bit. And, the difference might be coming down to realizing that God wants me to thrive, but I have to trust his plans for me and his provision for me and his knowledge that's way better than mine. Surviving for me would look like continually trying to avoid the landmines that fill the pathway that I would choose and left to my own devices to do that. And I proved time and time again before sobriety and frankly in recovery that's my natural tendency. So God wants me to thrive. I get sidetracked by other stuff, and that looks like survival. And survival, frankly, for me, it always turns out badly anyhow. So as I thought about that question, yesterday, it's really God wants me to thrive. My nature is to try to survive and ultimately always to fail.
Yeah. I feel like that's a lot of experiences in our life is what God sets the bar, and we just continue to chase the bar most of our life and hope we're doing a great job. And at the end of the day, surviving is just enough. And at the end of the day, we blink, and next thing you know, we're probably thriving. But that's in God's eyes. So, Bob, a little bit about your journey as well. We discussed with you more, though, about thriving and surviving, and then also from a psychological background. How do you think you can shift from, or when did you see the shift from when you were just surviving to when you took ownership and started to see thriving becoming and something that you really taking ownership of?
Well, it took quite a while, really, to put it in that terminology. First, getting sober was the first step. And as I shared in my book, that was the toughest year of my life. I was very fortunate in that after 12 or 13 months, I kind of lost the compulsion to drink. And I know a lot of people that it takes years, and some people never lose the compulsion for their drink or their drug. So I was fortunate there. And then I happened to get involved shortly after coming out of rehab and starting my recovery with sports psychology. We had a coach at the time, Bruce Coslett, that brought in one of the premier sports psychologists. he brought him in mainly to work with his coaching staff, get them to work as a team because none of them had ever worked together before. But he used to spend time with me on the field as we would watch practice, and we would talk about things. And he told me one day, he said, Reese, you do this every day. And I said, what do you mean, do this? He said, you do sports psychology, the way you talk to these players, the way you build them up, the way you handle their rehab, the way you get them back on the field. He says, you're doing this stuff all the time. So I pestered him some more, and he put me on some books. And then eventually in '94, I started my master's in psychology. And that resulted in my first book, Develop the Winner's Mentality. So as I put that all together, then I started seeing about thriving. Thanks, Schaefer. Every promo appreciated. But it was, I didn't really get a hold of the thriving until I started teaching psychology, or teaching it actually. I worked for a company called the Pacific Institute, which did a lot of corporate education. And it had a lot of cognitive psychology, and then mixed that in with the sports psychology and the courses that I had taken. And I noticed that I was, doing better, feeling better as I taught it, and not having to. I was noticing that some of my friends in AA and in 12-step were still just hanging on, and I was thriving. And part of that, one of the notes I made for us to talk about today was developing a MAGIS, M-A-G-I-S, MAGIS mindset, which is Latin for even more. So when you set your goals to do things, you say, okay, I'm going to do this. You make an affirmation and so forth, and say this or even more. And that even more is what really allowed me to thrive, because you get out before you. When you set a goal, sometimes, as we know, as Craig was talking about before, we can steer ourselves off the mark. Or if you're so focused on the goal, you miss a big opening to take your life in a better direction. And that's what I found. I loved the corporate teaching. Part of the job was to sell the program to corporations, and I hated that. I didn't like to sell. I loved the teaching. I didn't like to sell. So I said, well, maybe I could do this in college and teach psychology, because by that time I had my master's, and I couldn't get a job at a big school because I didn't have a PhD at the time. And I actually started out teaching athletic training at a small school in Roanoke, at Jefferson College of Health Sciences. And then that developed, then they shut down the athletic training program. I went, oh God, here I go again. And they said, would you like to teach full-time psychology for us? So it's being open to even more. And then that led to me creating a health psychology program there. And now I'm teaching for a university. And it was more than I had ever dreamed about doing. So it was modest. And so I think that's a big part of the hope that comes with this, and following the, as one of the people in one of my sponsors told me in AA, that God may be driving what was it? It's how do you God provides the bus, but you've got to drive it.
Mm-hmm.
And so you got to lay out what you want to do there.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So I'm going to ask this. You just mentioned God, and to me, you talk about him being in the front and me being the passenger. Quick. And you and I have talked about this for many years. But part of recovery is developing faith and a higher power. Tell us about your journey with navigating religion and spirituality. I know for me, that was probably the one thing that really completely eliminated my compulsion to drink drugs. Was my ability my blessing to receive when the time came, my spiritual foundation.
Yeah, that's a great question. For me, I came into AA like a lot of people, completely desperate enough to trust strangers, because I was out of ideas, and some strangers said, "Ask God to help you not drink," and so I did, and then I got a sponsor, and he believed in me, he cared about me, he showed me the way. A lot of times, he encouraged me, he spoke the truth into my life. And after the compulsion to drink had left, and I kind of, was living a sober life, he said to me, no pun intended, probably the most loaded question of all time, which was, this God that you say, right? I'm not saying it. No, this God that you say got you sober and keeps you sober, you think he might be worth getting to know a little bit better? Like I said, talk about the most loaded question of all time, no pun intended. Like, where, and it was wisdom, it was brilliance on his part. He knew the right time to ask that question. And I wasn't antagonistic towards God. I was raised in a Catholic household. My parents didn't really care about their faith. I wasn't interested in it, but I wasn't mad at God. I really hope God wasn't mad at me, but I kind of figured that if he was paying attention, he would be. Like my agnostic dad used to say, God's got more important things to worry about than you and me. And boy, oh boy, for a long time, I was hoping he was right. Because if God did bother to look at the way I was living my life, he wasn't going to be happy at all. But, with the help of my sponsor and that well-timed, very important question, I began to go down that path. And, you talk about thriving versus surviving. I had to change my yardstick. I had to understand, I had to come to believe that God wanted something better for me, that God would use me. To me, alcoholism is a very selfish and self-centered disease. And, part of it was pursuing alcohol to have fun. Part of it was just being so focused on it and the pursuit of those empty things, that I thought would bring me fulfillment. And that seemed in that part of my life to go hand in hand with drinking, right? Going out and having fun, going out like I do whatever it was. I mean, drinking was always a part of it. And it's kind of like somebody once in AA told me, one beer was too many and 1,000 wasn't enough. And those other empty things that I was pursuing at that time in my life, I could never get enough, right? And they were always empty. And so really it was changing my yardstick and believing that God wanted something better for me. He wanted to use me, which really blew my mind. But because, I'd be the last person in the world that God would want to use, right? He's going to want to use the solid, upstanding, righteous, humble, godly, unselfish people. Did he use me? Right? But as much as I still don't understand it, it's played out in my life. And so it's this idea that God is really who he says he is, and he has a purpose for me. And his primary purpose is to use me. Whether I'm an athletic trainer or a football player, whether I'm a lawyer, whether I'm a young media executive, it doesn't matter. He wants to use me. And that would have never occurred to me but it certainly has helped me. I mean, I love kind of learning a little bit about Bob's story. It's like, you go through the process of recovery and early recovery, and then what do? You give yourself to people. I mean, to me, that's the antithesis of the selfishness and the self-centeredness and the self-absorption of alcoholism. And man, oh man, you talk about the tension. I'm still a work in progress, very much so. And some days I feel like the progress is nil after all these years. But I believe what God says when he says he wants us to conform us to the image of his son, in which we were originally created. You know what? And that's never going to end on this side of heaven for me. I mean, what would it look like to end? Yeah, here I am. I fully reflect the image of Christ. Here, look at me. Like, no way. The best I can hope for is to be a work in progress. And I'm like most guys, like, I don't want to be a work in progress. I want to be done and move on to the next thing. So that's another thing. I'll stop for now. But later on, I'll talk about how important relationships are in navigating that. But I'll stop for now. I need to breathe.
Yeah. And I think one of the biggest things you said in that moment was forming a personalized relationship with God, knowing God for you and not just knowing the God that all know God, right? It's Craig's God, right? It's Schaefer's God. It's Bob's God. It's my God. That relationship I have that I've built with him, talking to him daily through my journey, through my adversity that some might not even know about, right? And to be that work in progress, personalizing that relationship makes it a lot more impactful, especially when you wake up and feel like you're not doing enough. To transition a little bit into a kind of piggyback off this actually is to transition into optimism and hope. And a lot of what recovery is filled with is the challenges and the roads and the frustrations and the difficulties and the mental straining that you guys have to go through to get to recovery. And I think while it's an excellent start, hope, it's nothing without hope. It's nothing without optimism. It's nothing without looking towards the bright light, right? Like, there's our opportunity. There's our chance. I'm trying to get to that point. Now, what are some ways you were able to find hope? And we can go around the horn here, Dad, and you can start off. But what were some ways you found hope within addiction? Whether it was hard or whether it was outside factors or relationships, give us a little inside scoop on what provided optimism and hope for you within your journey.
Finding fellowship and sharing my story. That was something huge for me, knowing that I was not alone. Because for so many years I felt I was alone. But finding fellowship and finding true, intimate, real relationship with other people, especially coming from the environment that I came from, where people like you for what you did, who you were, I felt very alone. And early in recovery, that fellowship and sharing my story and listening to stories was the first part of me finding hope in recovery.
Yeah. And I think that's a beautiful way, because at the end of the day, when we get to talk about these relationships, I feel like that's a big part of all of this. Craig, what about you?
Well, it's interesting. I go back to the whole transition from surviving to thriving. I mean, at the beginning, I hoped that these strangers could give me the magic potion to not drink today. And that's legit. I hope I can get through the next hour without drinking, or today, or this week. I hope I can get to 30 days. And that had to come first. That was right. It's not like, oh boy, if I had to do it all over again, like, you can't get around that part of it, at least for me and the people that I've met. And then this idea that God wants so much more for me. You guys have heard the rest of my story. I'm not going to get into it today. Faith and Schaefer have, but like, God blessed me beyond what I deserved, beyond what I could even imagine, certainly beyond what I could ever develop the nerve to ask for. But you know what I found myself is I've been in different recovery environments over the years, and I didn't do this on purpose. I just found it happening. I've led a lot of different environments. I've led them in churches. I've led them in our company. I've led them in, I've led AA meetings. I've led home groups of AA. But I always find myself saying to somebody the first time that I meet them and they share a little bit, and I don't know anything about them. In fact, they haven't shared very much because they usually share last, the way I do things, right? Like, other people share, and then you invite the person to share if they want or not. So all you kind of really know is their name and that something's caused them to show up to this thing. You know what that's like, right? How desperate must someone be to show up? That's all I really know about. And I just say, you know what? You don't have to live this way if you don't want to. And to me, fundamentally, that's the essence of hope. Now, again, for me, it blossomed into something much bigger and much better and much more fulfilling than that. I mean, you know what? I'd still go back there and make that same choice. I mean, just being sober and hanging on is better than living the life I was living. Don't get me wrong. But I agree with you guys. I see those guys when I was young in AA and be like, man, oh man, if this is what sobriety is like, just miserable people. angry, unhappy, negative, pessimistic people. And that's one of the things, a number of people, but certainly Schaefer being one of those people that stands out because he was always so positive. And that's really important to see that in somebody that, that they're coming from the same place that you are fundamentally, that they made a mess out of their lives, but they can still find hope. They can still be positive about life. And yeah, I don't have to live the way that I was living, and nobody else does either.
Yeah. And that's a big thing too. I think that's a beautiful thing is you don't have to live this way if you don't want to. You have more control than you think you do. Just believe in it. Hope for it. Bob, what about you? What were some ways that you found hope within your process?
Well, I think as I listen to my compatriots here, I would say it's a little bit of both. First, I developed hope in the rooms, in the meetings. After I got out of rehab, and I was in rehab for 2 months, which was very fortunate for me, but it was, they decided to keep me in the second month, I guess because they wanted to make sure I got it right. And that was a tough thing because I was fully expecting to, oh man, I'm out of here. And they said, no, the Jets have agreed to keep you in for a while longer. They didn't tell me how long. I spent a whole nother month. I didn't have a lot of hope as I know it now, like going to the meetings in rehab. After I got out and around the Northport, New York area where I lived on Long Island, there were dozens of meetings all the time. And where I settled in with my home group, my sponsor told me, said, there's a lot of good sobriety here. And I didn't know what the hell that meant. Okay, people don't drink, that's sobriety. And it was such a well-mixed group, men and women, older and younger, and that listening to them tell their stories, and because we have a tendency to suffer from terminal uniqueness. Nobody has my story. And finally, one day I heard my story, and I'm going, this is, and I had heard this guy talk several times before, so I went up to him after the meeting, started talking to him, and he shared some things, and that's when I think I first started feeling hopeful that this was not going to be a miserable life. I think I may have shared the last time that one of the things that threw me in rehab was we're sitting around in a big group, and I said, how am I going to grill a hamburger without a beer? And so, they starting to overcome that, and then realizing too that other people didn't drink like I drank. And I said, I can do this. I have hope. And over time, it just kept building until I felt very confident that I could be hopeful, and this was going to be an even better lifestyle, however you want to label it.
Yeah. Well, Dad, question in regard to hope. In what we just did, we shared stories of hope. We shared what our journeys to hope looked like. What do you think about how even sharing those stories of hope helped you or benefits you even in your journey today? How do you think that that's a great benefit for others?
Well, once I got past that first step, that the acceptance, probably acceptance, and I like the new word uniqueness. I thought I was the only one, that was going through what I was going through, and the biggest part of our disease is denial, right? And continue to lay its hit right there in front of you. Once I was able to do that, I was able to make some progress. I just found for me, I had to continue to make myself vulnerable and humble and continue to share. I remember the first time I met my buddy here, Greg, and I'm looking over there. I mean, the people that I have been blessed with in my life, I'm looking at this guy down the other end of the table, and he's these profound words and statements, and after the meeting, it just resonated, and we just started talking, and I can't begin to tell you how many stories, and how my life began to really flourish because of my real relationships, the relationships that I was able to establish early on. Early on, I'm talking about really early on. I had to do the 30 meetings in 30 days, and sometimes it was 2 meetings a day. And I just was very fortunate when I finally accepted where I was living my life on God's terms, and where I knew where I needed to be. Um, I began to make a tremendous amount of progress, and it was very. I'm very blessed for that.
Yeah. When we talk about acceptance, Craig, when we talk about that step, and we talked a little bit before the show started, but acceptance and seeing yourself and acknowledging without tearing yourself down, right? Without, beating yourself up for what you see in the mirror. How was that process for you, and how did you navigate the fine line between the two?
Yeah, that's a great question. And when I watched Friday's show, and one of the things that Bob talked about was, positive thinking, but he didn't say it quite this way. And my notes aren't in front of me, but you can't deny reality either, right? So there's a sweet spot in there. And I'll tell you what, maybe the most important thing for me, Faith, was to have a sponsor first off, and then other people, but starting with my sponsor who loved me unconditionally. So that's what allows me to look at the hard stuff, the bad stuff, the failures, the still falling short. Like it says it, we all sin, right, and fall short of the glory of God, even now. So to have somebody that knows that about me and sees that in me and still cares about me and still loves me like a brother. I mean, that's a huge foundational rock for me. And then, frankly, from there, I began to contemplate that maybe that's how God sees me, which is kind of obviously even more cooler, that, God who created me, created all of us, sees me like that. He knows everything about me, and he loves me anyhow. He watched, mankind, his creation unfold, and rebellion after rebellion after rebellion, and still, loved the world enough to send his son into the world to die for us. If we really can find that, at least for me, and like, wow, this person, and then ultimately this God loves me that much, that if I screw up, or when I screw up, they're still going to love me. It allows me to not have to necessarily do what I was doing for so many years with alcohol, which is try to medicate and turn my head away, right? Like, I can't look at that. I can't live with myself. I need an escape. I don't have to. It's kind of like what, I think it was before we started, but we were talking a little about the promises. Bob kind of highlighted this whole idea about not regretting the past nor wish to shut the door on it. I'm God's creation, and I'm sinful, right? But I'm God's creation, and he loves me. Armed with that, I don't feel that compelling need to run away from myself or deny my past or deny my present, for that matter. Mm-hmm. And I can stay there. I can not medicate, and I can try to let God continue to work in my life, encouraged by people like Schaefer and like my sponsor. Because there's times he's like, yeah, you're the only guy in this world that hasn't figured this out. You're the only guy that's repeated third grade 97 times in AA. Oh wait, no, somebody else that's kind of and part of it is trying to encourage them too. It's like, what does it say about the human condition that we're all, you guys, this whole idea of this whole ministry and this program, wanting to help other people, that you would think to do that and find it fulfilling. Here's Bob, I don't know too much about him, but from what I was able to piece together last week on that, he was given a chance to live a different life. And how did he respond? he embraced the life and tried to give it to other people. What does that say about us that we're fulfilled when we do that? What does that say about how we were made that we're fulfilled when we do that?
Yeah. Bob, how much do you think of your acceptance in your journey motivated what you do? Writing books, impacting the life of others, and teaching those, right? What everything Craig kind of just talked about, how much do you think, when you were in your journey, when you were having to have that step of acceptance, what do you think motivated you to enter that space?
Well, I'll start by saying early on in my sobriety, I was still a New York cynic. And as I used to say at the time, New York was the black hole of cynicism. I mean, I could find something wrong with everything. And one of the things I started doing, because I got out of rehab and started doing the sports psychology things, and I became aware of the goal setting and the positive thinking involved that's necessary to be a good athlete, especially a great athlete. And so one of the things that tickled for me was that, what about all these sayings? You go to these meetings, they got sayings on the wall, let go, let God. I can't remember, there's a saying for everything. And I kept asking myself, how do they work? Why do they work? And that's tied in with the sports psychology of of self-talk. You have to have positive self-talk. And so I started saying, okay, I get, one day at a time. That makes sense. I can understand how these little sayings that sound ridiculous when you first hear them, or my cynicism made them sound ridiculous. Oh, that's stupid. But I started seeing how important that was. And then that led me into looking into getting my master's degree in psychology. The other thing that led me into that was the fact that the NFL was getting more and more unstable. And when I first came into the league as the assistant trainer at Buffalo, he once told me, we don't get paid as well as the coaches, Reese, but we don't get fired. And around the early 90s, that started changing. People started firing longtime head trainers. And I'm going, uh-oh, what am I going to do if this happens to me? Because one of the things that I came to terms with in rehab was that, who am I if I'm not, hi, I'm Bob Reese, head trainer for the Jets, which is how I introduced myself for almost 20 years. Hi, I'm Bob Reese, head trainer for the Jets. And, who am I besides that guy? And that's where the hope comes in. That's where the understanding starts coming in, and realizing that that you have to be focused on the positive and on where you want to go. You can't just be there like a pinball and get bounced around all the time. Faith, you probably know this from your psychology background. Yet it's better to have an internal locus of control where you say, yeah, I have something to do with the direction I'm heading, as opposed to, fate's deciding it, luck and so forth. You've got to drive that bus. And So I don't know. I think I've wandered off what the question was.
Well, I think that you touched on a really great point because I want to transition into how we do transition, right? We transition is finding a new direction into your life. Dad, something Bob talked about was our identity is very much rooted in our redemption, right? It's when we're trying to, get our footing and trying to, through recovery, stable things are really helpful to us, right? Having a job, our job is often our purpose, stuff like that, right? When you're in recovery, when you're transitioning, how important was it for you and what did you look for when you were going through this process to be your next direction of life? Was it starting a family? Was it moving? Was it finding a new job to kind of fulfill, your new stability? What do you think it was when you were finding this new direction in life that helped you in this process?
Well, I think for me it was once I got through, the eighth and ninth step. When I got through the forgiveness, the forgiveness part of it, and I began to thrive on this accepting me for that I wasn't a bad person, that I had a disease, and I had to begin the process of redefining myself, as a man, and being around people like Craig and Bob, and being around other recovering people, saying it's okay to be in recovery, but then simultaneously, have to go back and the training camp of life, because I was by myself, so I had to go learn how to get a real job. I had to learn how to do all those things, and I had to apply the same level of preparation I did when I became a professional athlete. I mean, those are good attributes that I had as an athlete, learning how to do that. But once I got through that piece in my recovery, where okay, this is what has stalled me in life. This is where I had to forgive myself, and where I was able to begin to progress into my new life. Once I was able to do that, I call redefining my life. Once I was able to do that, I was able to make some significant progress. And I think I met Bob, I met Sue probably 4 years. They say don't get into a relationship for 2 years. But I met her at the right time in my recovery. And fortunately, she was in a place in her life where she was had a lens on recovery too, and we were able to build a relationship from there. But there's a lot. There's a lot. I mean, there's fellowship, there's meetings, there's my relationship with God. There's a lot that you have to unpack, and just continue to be hopeful. Continue to, we always say, just take it one day at a time. Continue to be vulnerable. And for me, what really helped was continue to give back. I continue to give back. I continue to nurture relationships. I continue to go speak. I continue to tell my story. And the more I gave, the more I was able to receive from them.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's a wonderful point. And as we transition into the promises, Dad, why don't you kind of take this? And I know Craig's going to kind of touch on
Can I
this.
say one thing? I want to talk about, Schaefer mentioned forgiveness.
Yeah.
And in the 12 steps, they tell you to make amends to the people that you've hurt. The one person they don't tell you to make amends to is yourself.
Right.
And you've got to learn self-forgiveness.
Right.
If you don't do that, I don't see how you can thrive.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Can I jump in really quick with something? Both Bob and Schaefer talked about kind of in different ways a little bit of transition out of, I would say, like a high profile, a very visible career identity. It's interesting. At the beginning of the show, you do a little bit of an introduction about Faith and Schaefer, and we introduce Bob and your guests. You do that too. We all have multifaceted identities, and all those identities have implications, right? I mean, Faith, you're a daughter, you're a sister, you're a friend, you're a business owner, you're all these different things, and I think one of the things that's helped me is to get some clarity about all the things that comprise my identity, and then figure out the implications, and then figure out which ones are most important. How do they impact my life? How do they impact the decisions I make, the priorities I make? And for me, and so I've been able to watch you and Devin grow up. You're a sister. I also know that you're a cousin, and I know you dearly love your cousins, but you know what? Your relationship with your brother isn't necessarily the same as your relationship with your cousins, as much as you love them, right? We all, at some level, we understand that. Not all the pieces of our identity are created equal, and they change.
Yeah.
So for me, it was, fundamentally, my primary identity, I'm a father, I'm a grandfather, I'm a husband, I'm a friend, all these things. I began to see myself first and foremost as a child of God, loved by God. And as a child of God, I may be a lawyer, I may be this, I may be that, and they all have different implications. But to me, the ability to kind of transition in life is really founded on my understanding that first and foremost, I'm a child of God.
Yeah.
And as a child of God, he may call me to be a football player, an athletic trainer, or a basketball player, or a business owner, or all these different things. And he will, as a matter of fact. I don't think that's the sole identity for anybody. But how important that is to me to kind of live my life and to go through some of the transitions that we're forced to go through. Because those are transitions.
Yeah. It all narrows down to helping us identify what our purpose is for us and who our identity is. And in a process like this, in a journey through recovery, that's very important for you to be able to narrow down the stuff that you can focus on. Because when you spread yourself too thin, where can your focus go, right? So having that identity, understanding that purpose is a great, ally and strengthening for you when you're going through this process. Dad, why don't you dive into the promises? Because you can maybe give us a background as well on that.
Yeah. Well, so as we wrap, the final quarter of our show, I thought it would be, we talked a little bit about thriving through recovery. We talked about hope. Everybody knows our story are pretty similar. When you meet somebody that you love and adore in recovery, you'll find that the more you know them, the more you're the same. We can relate to each other. We can probably talk for an hour, 2 hours, another 3 hours, and continue on talking. There's something that happens in recovery, and it's page 83 and 84 in the big book called The Promises. Now, I wanted Craig to read it because it is the ultimate. To me, it's like the Super Bowl for me. Winning the Super Bowl when you realize that you're experiencing the promises of the program. They talk about the layer, the onion, the lens comes off. All of a sudden you are able to see things that you were not able to see before. I want Craig to read the promises. We may not have enough time to completely deep dive into it, but I thought it'd be something you want to share.
As Schaefer said, these are found at pages 83 and 84 of the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. If we are painstaking about this phase of our development, we will be amazed before we are halfway through. We are going to know a new freedom and a new happiness. We will not regret the past, nor wish to shut the door on it. We will comprehend the word serenity, and we will know peace. No matter how far down the scale we have gone, we will see that how our experience can benefit others. That feeling of uselessness and self-pity will disappear. We will lose interest in selfish things and gain interest in our fellows. Self-seeking will slip away. Our whole attitude and outlook on life will change. Fear of people and economic insecurity will leave us. We will intuitively know how to handle situations which used to baffle us. We will suddenly realize that God is doing for us what we could not do for ourselves. Are these extravagant promises? We think not. They are being fulfilled among us, sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly. They will always materialize if we work for them.
I second that.
Amen.
Yeah. Dad, those of you watching, give us a thumbs up if you enjoyed that one piece. I know I did, because there's so many promises. I don't think I've ever seen that written down. Because for what a lot of people don't know is that while I was part of your journey, Dad, through a lot of your life, I wasn't there for the initial start and a lot of the beginning. And so a lot of my awareness and what I witnessed with your recovery and your journey was very much on, the becoming the man part, right? Evolving who you are as a man and a father and a husband and a friend. And that was what I was, what I had visibility to. Dad, talk just a little bit, and then you can kind of lead the discussion because we have 5 minutes, which I think we can touch on. Each person gets a piece of it. Is what are these promises? And while they seem, for some people who are looking in, like maybe they are extravagant, maybe there's a lot they're asking for, but for you, there's a companionship that you feel. There's a pride through all of this. What is your initial feeling when you feel and read this?
Well, I wanted to have this to be the part of our show because it is the promise of recovery that you experience all pieces of the promises, all of the promises. I've experienced most all of it. The intuitively are able to handle things that used to baffle us. Self-seeking. I comprehend the word serenity. I say the serenity prayer all the time. So I have a toolbox, and this is in my toolbox along with this serenity prayer, and I apply to every aspect of my life. And I just thought, for those who are in recovery, that are struggling with recovery, who's trying to thrive through recovery, if you can get to this point, man, you are very blessed.
Yeah. Craig, what about you?
Hey, man, it's so hard to kind of pull these apart from one another because they all tie into each other. So for me, this idea that I will know peace is amazing. But I think a part of the knowing peace for me, a big part of it is, is losing the feeling of uselessness and self-pity. Losing interest in selfish things and gaining interest in our fellows, that has brought me peace.
Yeah. Bob, what about you?
Well, I think that the only one that I disagree with is the first area up there where it said we'll be amazed before we're halfway through. I don't know when I'm halfway through. I'm probably beyond halfway through now, but I'm often still amazed, and it becomes so important that we recognize who we are. And building off what Craig had said earlier, we have all of these self-images. Faith, you're a daughter, you're a basketball player, you're an entrepreneur, you're a woman. All of these different self-images have components, and we have to look at them almost separately and see which ones we want to build on, which ones we want to eliminate, and so forth. And it can be as simple as, my self-image as, doing the dishes, taking out the trash. We've all got self-images of those things. Now, most of them, it doesn't require any effort or thinking about. But the ones, when we want to change and move towards thriving, that's when we have to look at what is it that we want to change. And it doesn't all happen all at once. It's incremental. It's a little at a time. Do it all over here, a little over there, and all of a sudden it comes together. And just to have the faith that it will.
Yeah. No, I love it. And again, that's page 83, 84 of the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. If you want to take a chance to look it up after the show. I know I enjoyed it very much. I enjoyed the show in general. Two really great guests to kind of highlight this topic. Bob, you did a great job on Friday, and then Craig, you and Bob both did an amazing job today. A great way to start the week as well. Dad, what do you think?
Awesome. This is again, both of these friends of mine have been a tremendous part of my life and touched my life, and we'll be lifelong friends. And of course, the fact we have recovery in common is really awesome. And I just, doing this and having an opportunity to share my story with people like Bob and Craig, it continues to give me hope.
Let me tag on to that 1 second, Faith. The great thing about the fellowship is that Schaefer and I can go for years and not have any communication. And then all of a sudden, some reason we have communication, and boom, it's, we already, not only do we have this shared past at the Jets, we have a shared past in 12-step.
Yeah.
And in recovery. It's wonderful.
Yeah. Fellowship is a wonderful word for it, for sure. Well, thank you, Craig. Thank you, Bob, for joining us this morning. And we look forward to having you back one day soon.
Thanks for having us. It's always a pleasure. It's always a great fun. Thanks.
Thank you. Maybe next year.
Awesome.
And thank you, everyone, wonderfully for joining us this wonderful Monday morning. A quick quote of the day, because we missed it early in the show. Nothing is impossible. The word itself says, I'm possible. And so as we continue on, National Recovery Month comes to a close. We head into October and a wonderful fall. We appreciate everyone for joining this Faith Family Focused family per usual. Thank you, of course, to Amazon Fire, YouTube, Facebook, Roku, Apple TV, and of course, our key platform out of Phoenix, Arizona, E360 TV. Again, this is Faith Family Focused. We're going to use our faith as a vehicle to help heal and sustain others and strengthen their own family core. And of course, our slogan with our Slugs mugs.
Let go, let God. Let go, let faith. Let go, let love.
Everyone have a wonderful rest of your week. And we'll see you guys on Friday with the huddle.